Here's why I decided never to LARP outdoors in the UK again. We were LARPing in Wales, where the weather is either glorious or absolutely chucking it down. I was separated from my friends as the siling rain turned into flooding. Into a tent, with a group whose first language wasn't English, but they seemed nice. Until it was discovered, I knew all the verse words to Queen's "We Will Rock You." All LARP was abandoned, and I spent an afternoon, a whole evening, and into the next morning, being forced into singing them, while they all just clapped along and did the chorus. Again, and again, and again. Look, I just don't see what the horror story was. Buddy, you're a young man, hard man, shouting in the street, gonna take on the world someday? You got blood on your face, you big disgrace, waving your banner all over the place saying, "My name is Jacob Crowe and welcome to the Crow's Perch, where like a mama bird feeding her young, I spew scraps of discarded RPG horror stories directly into your mouth hole." I try not to mock you for your fetishes, but since I'm a cartoon bird, I'm limited in my range of emotions to voice this disappointment towards you. But there is no greater disappointment as a DM than knowing you're going to have to let a player go. It's a tough decision, especially since most DMs invite their friends into their games, and it's hard to tell a friend that they're just not a good fit for your game. So let's put our favorite boots on, or bring out the banhammer, as we gather up a murder and dive into this story. Hi everyone. So, I have never posted one of these before, so bear with me. So I am the Dungeon Master for a fully homebrew campaign. I tend to be more lenient than many DMs out there, and let players use species they can't use normally, create things that you normally wouldn't see, etc, etc. So, one of the players has stretched the point of homebrew that I allow with characters, by essentially recreating an anime character from a popular anime. I did not want to allow this at first, but he promised to try and homebrew it to be different, and hasn't done so as of yet. There are other things to this as well. We'll call this person Lex. So, Lex has caused other issues in the party, out and in character. Lex, when I first met him, set off many red flags in my mind, but I didn't think anything of it, considering I am normally very distrustful of others when I first meet them. Lex has continued since I first met him, to continue dropping red flags left and right. At first, I had 5 players, an average amount. I promise this is relevant. The party was made up of a non-binary gremlin, 3 males, and 1 female. A strange balance in itself. We shall call the female Gorgon. So, Gorgon plays a tiefling bard. No, her character's not that kind of character, mostly. So, Lex's character is a human fighter that has a demonic amulet, so Gorgon can sense its presence. Lex has decided to try and romance this player character. Gorgon is uncomfortable with this idea. Lex has made several not-so-secret advances on Gorgon in their private messages, which Lex does attempt to deny. Lex also has main character syndrome. Always takes the spotlight, makes all the others uncomfortable, and gets extremely annoyed when something doesn't go his way. He throws a temper tantrum to rival that of a toddler. He has stated that if his character dies, that we either reset the entire campaign, or he gets an immediate, non-death save revive, including that if he doesn't get his way, he will leave this party entirely. Mind you, Lex is 21. He is not acting his age. Recently, we added 2 new players to the campaign. Gender does not matter with this instance. But Lex, when told of the new players, freaked out. He started complaining and making everything a problem, and going on and on about the 2 new people, threatening the integrity of the group forevermore. He makes claims that they will mess up the schedule, when in reality, the scheduling problems we have to work with is making sure we have time to keep him in time with the rest of the party, considering he lives across the pond. Yesterday, I sent out a form to the group, asking when everyone is ready for the next session. Make a guess who screwed up with scheduling and made it a problem. Lex. Lex, once again, has thrown things off. Lex constantly makes himself the center of attention, in and out of the campaign. He brags about everything, belittles the others, makes a mockery of the LGBTQ+, claims to have big mental health issues when everyone knows he does not. Lex lies about a large portion of everything. He claims to have all these problems, and then he does the exact opposite in a number of other situations, and he has not shown otherwise. As a side note, this world is something I have put all of my love into. I try my hardest to make sure I have everything prepared. I am ready for improv, and do it constantly, more often than one might think. I have shown this to a number of people. Lex is the only one to try and change things that he has no right to control. So, am I the a-hole if I decide to kick this player? I apologize for putting this out there. I am at my wit's end, trying to figure everything out. And I am 99% certain I missed several things in my frantic mode of trying to put everything together in one cohesive thought process thing. While I would have preferred a bit more specifics from the events in this story, I don't think this OP is the asshole. Lex is not a good fit for this party. He clearly has disdain for the people in the group, and kinda sounds like a creep from all the unwanted flirting outside of game that Gorgon made clear she wasn't interested in. In my opinion, that alone warrants a talking to or an outright boot. And his whole main character syndrome, and trying to take over the narrative of the game? It sounds like he was less interested in playing your game, and more interested in just controlling it, without having the responsibility of actually being in charge. But what I didn't expect is a few hours later, the OP came back to this story with their decision. So let's keep the murder going and dive right into this Afterstory update. So, yes, this was 4 hours after the initial post. But it did help out a lot. I struggle constantly with making decisions about kicking people. And I did talk to the other players constantly throughout this process. And his homophobia really pissed me off as well. I am trans personally. Gorgon is bisexual. The non-binary person is a/aromantic. So the table is essentially half and half. And if you were wondering, I made my decision. Lex is being kicked. Gorgon is feeling better, it seems, and the other players and I are already feeling better. Again, thank you to those who helped. And the person who commented karma. This is my first post. I had to look up what karma means. I did not know what it meant and what it was for Reddit. So yeah, I did this based off advice from a close friend. Thanks everyone. Have a good day/night wherever y'all are at. To user Dreadnought67, I think you made the right choice. I know it's not an easy one, and confrontation can be difficult, but you and your party will be thankful that you made it. And with that, I wish you luck in your next adventure. As for the rest of us, let's dive into this next story, LARPing. Surely you've heard the term before, but if you haven't, it stands for Live Action Roleplay. But what is LARPing? Think of it as playing your D&D character, but dressing up as them in real life, and waving a foam sword around and throwing beanbags while yelling fireball at the top of your lungs.
Lightning bolt! Lightning bolt!
For some, it's a great way to showcase their cosplay skill, or to really get into the feel of being their characters. And for others, it's just a way to chill out with friends and howl at the moon in a Werewolf the Apocalypse game. All while pretending you are all definitely not furries. And so without further ado, let's pick Team Jacob as we dive into this story. Alright, so this may not be as horrible as some of them, but I feel the need to share it. Back in my youth, I did a lot of World of Darkness LARPs. I think at one point when I was 19, I was doing 7 games every 2 weeks. One of my favorite was a werewolf LARP we did on the campus of a community college. We got really into it, learned wolf howls for hunting, had huge theological discussions in character. It was great. So at one point, we were having a moot, which is a big meeting of the cairn, local setting for the werewolves, at an outside area of the college. It's a little secluded, but still open to the public. We're doing challenges to rank up. We're having feats of strength, airing grievances, and then the storyteller playing the Elder starts telling a story. He was an amazing fella, real good voice, really gets deep into character. What he doesn't see, that the rest of us do, is a drunken college student coming up, seeing us gathered, and making a curvy beeline towards our group. We do. But we also don't want to interrupt our leader. So the drunk guy gets close enough to listen to our elder, going on about spiritual matters and such. And it kinda sounds like just a religious sermon. So the drunk dude raises his hand and starts to say, "Hey, what are you talking about?" And our leader, who did not see him approach, and only sees this guy near the group, snaps out, "Silence, cub! Sit down and listen." And the dude does. Like, just drops down onto a bench like a hurt puppy. Our other storyteller makes her way to him, and lets him know what's going on, and he shambles drunkenly away. The elder didn't even know it had happened until after the game when we told him. The look on this poor drunk guy's face, like he had stumbled onto some sort of cult. Beautiful for us, but surely a horror story for him. This poor boy. I imagine that ever since, he told his frat brothers he met a werewolf cult outside of the school. I'm just glad he didn't call animal control. Always gotta appreciate a good cringy palate cleanser, especially since our next story is a bit infuriating. As a Pathfinder game goes awry, and a stepfather definitely does not become the father who stepped up. And so, without further ado, let's gather up a murder and dive into this story. This is a story from several years ago, and I still think about it often. The short backstory was that my mother was getting married to this guy. I'll name him George. They were getting married at Universal Studios in Florida, and then the plan was to go on a cruise to the Bahamas after to celebrate. And my birthday would also occur during the cruise, so it was basically her birthday present to me to fly me out since I was living with my dad, and take me on the cruise. While relaxing in the hotel suite, doing after-wedding stuff, like stuffing thank you cards for gifts, my older brother, I'll name Joey, spoke up and was like, "Hey, to pass the time, how about I run a quick Pathfinder one-shot for you guys?" Me and George were interested. I played a ton of D&D, but never really played Pathfinder, and George played D&D in high school in like the 80s. We spent the day reading through the core rulebook, and looking up races and lore online. I ended up making a fetchling rogue, cause I was like, ooh, shadow person rogue, so cool. I was like 13. Cut me some slack, okay? George made some kind of melee bruiser. Can't really remember the details. Just that his solution to most things were, I hit it. The one shot was going decently well, until we got into this encounter, where we were supposed to escort some carriage through town, and we were assailed by enemies. I tried to defend myself, and do what I could, but George, for some reason, refused to leave the carriage, and effectively refused to fight on the front line. This would have been fine, if he had any ranged attacks, but he didn't. So he just squatted on the carriage, going, "I'm ready to attack anyone who gets near." Lo and behold, I end up dying, and he runs off, overwhelmed, and gets finished off. I react pretty negatively, and since I saw he did a dumb play, and me being a 13-year-old smartass, I just yell at George, "You dumbass! What the fuck was that shit?" George just responds, "Do not speak to me in that tone." Since I'm pissed, since I just died, and I admit I was a bit of a dick here, I responded, "This is the tone a fucking dumbass deserves." And George goes, "Do not speak to your father like that." And without thinking, I just blurted out, "You're not my dad." And before I even realized what happened, George smacked me across my face. My face hurt, my ears were ringing, and all I saw and comprehended was a look of pure fury on my older brother's face. And then a full-blown fight broke out. My older brother was trying to beat the ever-loving shit out of George. I wasn't fully there, so I was kind of absent-mindedly on autopilot, and went to hold my brother back. That's when our mom came back with groceries. She saw the fight. She saw the red welt, and beginning bruise on my face, and demanded to know what the hell had happened. And for the rest of the night, all me and my brother heard from the master bedroom was arguing. The next day, the day we were supposed to go onto the cruise ship, my mom woke us up and told us that my older brother was gonna be sharing the cabin suite on the ship with me, and that she and George were gonna each take the single cabins that were meant for me and my brother. We didn't really interact with or see George the entire cruise. I ran into him once at the 24-hour pub when I went to go get some late-night chicken wings. It was really awkward, and he was drinking himself silly at the bar. After the cruise ended, I went back home, and a few months later, I found out that my mom and George had separated. TLDR, Mom marries new guy, who did some questionable plays in Pathfinder one-shot. I, being a 13-year-old, react negatively at his perceived stupidity. George hits me, and infuriates my older brother and mom. Mom and George fight, and shortly after, separate. As a former teenager myself, I know, shocking, who's had his own gripes with step-parents, I completely understand why you had such a horrible reaction towards him. However, though it was in the worst way possible, you were kinda right. I do not envy the people who date single parents who have kids in their teens. Teenagers suck. But if upon receiving an insult from you, and striking you was his first reaction, that says a lot more about George than it does about you. It is nice to see, though, that your mom clearly had her priorities straight with how she dealt with this. So if anyone gets a bravo, it's definitely her. As for the game itself, perfectly fine to give advice to fellow players so you can come up with strategies to beat the bad guys. But in normal situations, unlike this one, try to do so without overstepping their agency or by mocking their in-game decisions. Player skill varies wildly, and not everyone is going to recognize what the most optimal moves are at any given time. Anyway, that's it for today's stories. And if you like today's stories and would like to hear more of them, then why not leave a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss the latest uploads. And if you made it this far, why not leave a comment? Can't think of a comment? Then leave the comment, cruise. That way I know you made it to the end of today's video. I would also like to announce memberships for anyone who wants to support the channel financially without having to go on Patreon to do so. By hitting the join button on this video, you can, for the same price, gain access to the same perks as my patrons, including shoutouts at the end of every video and early access to each week's main video. In addition, you also get cool little emotes, done by my artist George, to use in the comment section as well as during my live streams, some of which you might recognize from my thumbnails. So check it out and become patrons like my Counts of Quills. Oh, you know I always like the Counts of Quills? Like Hexblading, Shawkay, Critical Konik, Evix, King Drazil, Christian Pip, Cosmosis, Rikus, Vincent, Haley Thompson, Zero Fang, and of course, who can forget Netscape Navigator? But some among you have joined the Barons of Beaks, like Sara Warren, Spectre Spark, ArsTorok, ghostleegon, MrHypocritical, Jayvon Meighan, Jesse Schoedel, Kuntos Weasel, Techblog, Chorustor, Cardispawn, A Modest Pastry, Jester King, Lord Rend, Gibber Woods, Wormy, Den of the Drake, McEatley, and Honya. Or you could pay like $5 more and be like the cool Dukes of Feathers, you know? You don't have to make it all dramatic or anything. Like the Kai-veMind, the SchoolBus, MirageVaxus, he's a pretty cool guy. Quinn, Blues, Otters is a little underdash there. Jared Zemlin, I like Jared Zemlin, he's nice. Doc Salty 96, Matthew, MulQueeny, can't forget about Matthew, and Acroth. And with all of that out of the way, I will see you next time, as the crow flies. But you're a strong man, just on the world someday, got on your face, you big disgrace, some boy, they're gonna punch you back in your place.